Welcome to the WRAL Daily Download. I'm your host, Amanda Lamb. In today's deep dive conversation with WRAL state government reporter Will Doran, we're going to be talking about a federal lawsuit filed against the state by the American Civil Liberties Union. The basis of the lawsuit is that the ACLU believes the state's anti-rioting legislation is unconstitutional. Will, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me.
So let's backtrack a little so everyone can kind of understand the context here and the background of how we got to this point. Can you explain the law to us and when and how did it pass?
Yes, well, if we're really backtracking, this all goes back to 2020 and the large Black Lives Matter protests that spread all over the country, all over the state. And this law is really a reaction to those. And it passed once in 2021, and we can talk more about this later, got vetoed by the governor and came back up again this year and is now law. So second time was the charm for this law, but it would increase drastically the penalties for rioting. And it would also allow the police to arrest speakers at rallies who don't actually participate in rioting themselves, but if those rallies later become violent, the police could then actually charge those people with felonies who had spoken beforehand. So those two factors in combination have led to the ACLU saying this is in multiple ways a violation of the First Amendment. It's going to have, a chilling effect on protesters, making people too scared to, go out in the street for even, what they intend or assume is going to be a peaceful protest. People have no intention of breaking windows. They say that's actually the intent of this law, is to scare people from taking to the streets so that we don't see mass outpourings, for various causes like we saw in 2020.
And so where a lot of things might have been misdemeanors in the past, they would be felonies, and they would also give the police more power to arrest people who in the past were not breaking the law, but under this law, they will be breaking the law.
Right. Obviously right now it's not illegal to stand up and give a speech. But under this law, it now actually could be. And, no one's actually been charged with this yet. It's only been law for a few weeks at this point. So we're still very early on. It's pretty untested. But, there's that concern that, someone could be criminalized just for the words that come out of their mouth.
And the governor did not veto this because he knew he didn't have the numbers in terms of the political balance of our General Assembly.
Correct. Like I said, he vetoed this before in 2021. Many of the legislature's Democratic members, especially the black members, say, this is clearly just aimed only at Black Lives Matter protests. The Republican supporters have said, no, this applies to all riots. It doesn't matter what your political persuasion are. If you riot, you smash windows, set buildings on fire, things like that we've seen in the past, attack the Capitol, you should face consequences for that. But Democrats fear that, it will be applied a little more extremely towards more liberal-leaning protesters. And so Cooper vetoed it originally, but then the 2022 elections happened. Republicans picked up more seats, they now have a veto-proof majority in the legislature after one Democrat switched sides, which is maybe a topic for a different podcast. And so, plus, if there were a small number of Democrats who voted for this bill this year. So Cooper, he saw that it was, a done deal and didn't really have the opportunity to veto it. He could have, but, probably would have lost that battle.
And this really sounds like it's falling down party lines pretty clearly.
Yes.
So we will be back after the break with more from WRAL's Will Doran about what is likely to happen next with this lawsuit. Welcome back to the WRAL Daily Download. I'm talking with WRAL's Will Doran about a lawsuit filed by the ACLU against the state regarding our new anti-rioting law. So let's look back. You were talking in the first half about some of these protests in 2020. What would this law look like if it were applied to things that have already happened in the past? What could have happened or what could happen in the future?
Yes, it's obviously impossible to predict the future, but like I said, a big part and probably the most controversial part of this law is the fact that speakers can be arrested. And so, you could have seen, for instance, back again, hearkening back to the George Floyd protests in 2020 that were in late May, early June, when here in downtown Raleigh, we did have some looting, some vandalism, fires. I was out there covering it. I got tear gassed myself. It was,
it was pretty intense. I was there as well. Yeah, I was there that Sunday night, and it was pretty intense.
It was a dicey scene, and so this would allow not only for some of the people who actually did end up being arrested for that rioting and looting, they would
people
now
that were
face
creating some violent acts, that were committing some violent acts.
Exactly.
Okay.
Those folks who got arrested would, under this law now, actually face even harsher penalties than they did in the past. But also, it would have allowed police to, if they wanted, go back and arrest people who had spoken hours earlier. When all of the more violent acts were happening, this was around midnight on those nights. It was late at night, but they could have gone back and before any violence started, when someone was talking and just maybe in the middle of the afternoon to a peaceful crowd, they could have said, well, some members of that crowd later went and rioted, and we think that your speech
incited that
riot.
It seems like, and I'm sure this is what the ACLU lawsuit is about, that is, infringing on people's First Amendment rights to freedom of speech, and that's the concern here.
Yes, and they say that, similar laws have already been ruled unconstitutional in other states, and this is pretty clear-cut First Amendment violation. We heard all the same things from Democratic lawmakers when this bill was being debated in the first place. They said this is obviously unconstitutional, obviously violates the First Amendment, but, that didn't hold any water. The law passed anyways.
So, I have to ask the question, was this expected? Is this kind of what the ACLU does? Did everybody say, well, of course they're going to file a lawsuit?
Yes. The question was always just a matter of when. And with it being so early, there's no one who's actually been arrested using this law. No one has actually been charged with any of these new laws that this has created. So there is a question of, okay, will you even be able to make it stick in court, if you don't have anyone who can actually point to it and say, I've been harmed by this. But what they say to kind of answer that preemptively is they say, well, it's going to create this chilling effect where people might not get harmed by this law, but that's only because they're going to be too scared to go protest in the first place. And the First Amendment guarantees people the right to peaceably assemble and to protest. And they say if people are too frightened to even attempt to do that because of what the government's doing, then the government is de facto violating their rights. Even if they're not arresting them, if people are kind of just stopped from even being confident enough to go out.
Preventing them from going out and exercising their First Amendment rights. So is there a precedent for this? You mentioned that some other states have passed or have tried to pass laws like this. Has the ACLU sued other states for similar legislation?
Yeah, there have been lawsuits over things like this going back decades. And as I said, similar things have been ruled unconstitutional in the past. I don't know if the ACLU will necessarily, be successful in knocking down some of the increased penalties. That's kind of generally recognized as something the legislature can do. They can say, okay, this is, this crime is this level of felony, this crime is this level of felony. But especially the part with the speakers. And then, there's also the concern too of how exactly the police might use their power in the future. And will they, say, go and arrest people by the hundreds? There's a big protest, maybe a handful of people do something bad, break a window, throw some rocks, do something illegal that they're not supposed to do. But then if only 5 or 6 people are doing that, will the police then swoop in and round up,
everyone,
400 people,
right,
who are on the scene? That's a question of how will this actually be applied in the future.
And that kind of situation can also lead to more acts of violence because people get very upset when hundreds of people are arrested. So this is kind of a cyclical thing that, I guess we won't know how it's going to play out until we have some kind of a protest. What are the next steps here? What happens with this lawsuit next?
Well, next, the legislature gets its chance to respond. So I was down at the legislature earlier this week. I tried to talk to a couple Republican officials about this. Everyone was being pretty tight-lipped so far, which makes sense. They're still waiting on their lawyers to tell them, okay, here's what our response is going to be. So, we haven't really heard too much from them, but there will be something, and, then it'll be up to a judge to decide whether or not they want to put this law on hold and stop it from actually being used while this lawsuit kind of winds its way through the court system, which could be years or not. The law could still remain in effect even while the lawsuit's going on. So that's going to be, the first issue for a judge to figure out.
And it kind of occurs to me, I know we did an earlier show when this was going through the legislative process, that this is really kind of a visceral and emotional issue. Because if you ask most people, they're going to say, no, nobody should break windows or destroy property during any kind of an event, protest. But when you start to get into these nuances of freedom of speech and people who are just there but not participating in some of these other acts, seeing very serious charges on their record, it gets very emotional for people.
It does. And actually, the lead sponsor of the bill that eventually became this law is the Speaker of the House here in North Carolina, Tim Moore. So obviously, very powerful support there. And he has a condo here in downtown Raleigh and talked about how, while this was happening while you and I were out on the street getting tear gassed, he was, standing up on his balcony and watching this all play out, from his scene over downtown, and how it just really bothered him. And he said, look, I get that protests aren't always pretty. People might say impolite things. People might get kind of rowdy, and that's fine. That is all First Amendment protected behavior. But when it crosses the line and turns into looting, turns into vandalism, that's something that, we can't stand for as a civilized society and need to really crack down on. So that was his explanation for this, that by amping up these penalties, by expanding the rules and allowing police to, arrest people for more types of protest activities, that it's going to cut down on that sort of illegal activity and encourage people to remain, if not civil, at least nonviolent.
And maybe prevent it. And then, of course, the flip side is that people who are not doing anything that most of us would consider illegal, like making a speech, would then be arrested. So a lot of concerns here on both sides. And I know you're going to continue to follow this. So thank you, Will, for breaking it down for us. And thank you for listening to the WRAL Daily Download and making us part of your morning routine. If you like what you're hearing, please rate us on Apple Podcasts or on whatever podcast app you use. Another great way to get WRAL news is the Morning Briefing newsletter. It's a daily email waiting in your inbox every morning with Triangle news events and headlines to get you ready for the day. Sign up at WRAL.com/newsletter.